Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Welcome, dear friends, to Kardec Radio. And here we are in our Health and Spirituality program, which has been happening for almost 11 years. And we have the joy of learning together. And today, we're going to talk about our very essence that goes from one life to the next. And can you believe it? We may recall our previous lives' experiences in our childhood. How so? We want to know more about it. And why do we probably remember? Is there a reason why we remember? What do we do with it? Who to talk about it? So here today we have with us our dear friend, Carol Bowman. She's here with us, and it's not the first time. Thank God she's been with us at Kardec Radio and the Spiritist Movement. She wrote so many books, and you can go to her website, carolbowman.com, and you will know more about her, the works, the books, and her past life therapy as well. She's an internationally known author, lecturer, counselor, past life regression therapist, and pioneer in the reincarnation studies. She wrote books such as the one we're going to talk about today, Children's Past Lives and Return from Heaven, and it's been translated into more than 22 languages. And she's here with us to tell more, because somewhat it's afflictive for some people when they see their children recalling previous lives. They don't know what to do. We just dismiss it. And is that the best approach? Probably not, right? We want to know more, discuss about this, and you are welcome not only to watch, but to ask your questions, make your comments, interact, to make this experience deeply rich and very therapeutic. So it's a blessing that we all welcome here at Kardec Radio once again, Carol Bowman. Thank you, Carol, for being with us once again. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And thanks for having me again. I always enjoy our sessions together.
It's wonderful, Carol. I always remember, for those who don't know, the many adventures, right? The one in Spain when you were giving a lecture about this book that was actually translated into Spanish, right?
That's right.
And it's fantastic. The other one in Boston at the United States Spiritist Symposium, when you were the keynote speaker. So many opportunities here at Kardec Radio as well. And the topic today is so important and beautiful, though we may not talk about these things much in the United States, and that's an impediment, right?
A big one.
A big one. But would you like to tell people how you got interested into this?
It's actually an interesting story because, and I know you agree, everything is orchestrated.
Yes.
You know, the important things in our lives, our paths are orchestrated. And in my mid-30s, I got very sick with it became chronic lung problems. And at the same time, I was having these visions of myself as a man who was lying in bed, coughing up blood. And for some reason, it was so real. It was visceral with me, this image. It was more than just an image. And I knew that I had been this man who had died. I could see him dying of consumption in the 19th century, which is a very common way to die then. And I knew that my illness in this life probably had something to do with that. because I was doing the same thing with my lungs. So as fate would have it, a friend in Asheville, North Carolina, where I was living at the time, told me about a hypnotherapist from Florida who was traveling through and who did past life regression. I had never heard of it before, but I thought, I'm going to do this. Maybe this can help me. And that 1 2-hour session turned my illness around.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, my doctor was so astounded that he actually did a regression with the same hypnotherapist because he was curious why my illness, that it really had become chronic over several years, was healed after one session. And I went back to 2 lives, not only the life when I was in the 19th century dying of consumption, but I also saw that I died in a gas chamber in World War II. And I was born in 1950, so it was my most recent life, I believe. And it was obviously a very emotional death because I lost everything. And in that session, I had a good cry. I started putting the pieces together about all these things about my personality that related to that life. And I saw how much of my fear, my grief had carried over in my lungs. So at that time, I was starting to train in past life therapy because I thought this is the most amazing thing. I want to share it with other people. The potential for healing with past life therapy is so great. So at that time, we were about to move from Asheville for opportunities for my husband, business opportunities. And the hypnotherapist was visiting me. And I told him about my son's phobia, which developed a year before his visit. And he became terrified at a fireworks display on 4th of July. And it wasn't just scared, it was hysterical. And I thought, well, that's odd. He never acted like that before, but I didn't, things like this happen with children. They have phobias. But my friend Norman, the hypnotherapist, we had become friends. I told him about my son Chase's fears and he was due to start kindergarten. He hadn't gone to school before. And I thought, well, if he becomes hysterical in kindergarten, with something relating to these loud noises that frightened him, they wouldn't know what to do with him. And I thought, well, maybe Norman can give Chase some post-hypnotic suggestions so the next time he was exposed to loud booming sounds, he wouldn't be terrified. So he used a very simple technique with my 5-year-old. He said, sit on your mother's lap, close your eyes, and tell me what you see when you hear the loud sounds that frighten you. And up to that point, I never thought children had past lives. I just didn't know about the phenomenon. So when my son started describing himself as a soldier on a battlefield and described his artillery and how he was scared, he didn't know who he was shooting at, and he missed his wife and family, that was the moment when, the heavens opened up for me and I understood this must be a past life experience he's talking about, because nothing in his short life that I knew of, and I was a stay-at-home mother, could account for his phobia of those loud booming sounds. So he described how he was, missed his wife and family. He didn't want to be in battle. He said war is a bad place. And this memory continued to develop over a couple of years to the point where he remembered his death in that lifetime behind a cannon. And the upshot of his recollections, when, he was able to talk about them and I could help him process them, and Norman, the hypnotherapist, helped him, was that his phobia went away. But even more interesting, when he described being in battle on a battlefield, he described being shot in his wrist and how they had taken him out to what he described as a hospital, but it was actually a field hospital. It turned out it was the American Civil War. We started piecing it together from what he said. And he said he was shot in his right wrist and they put him back into battle. And that's right before his death. He was injured and then he was killed behind a cannon. but he had chronic eczema on his spot, on that spot on his wrist where he said he had been shot, which had not responded to any medical treatment, even alternative treatments. Nothing could cure that eczema. And after his first recollection when he was 5, when he was, we were with Norman, the hypnotherapist, his eczema went away completely. So I was starting to put all this together. His memory was very close to the surface. It didn't take hypnosis. It was just, tell us what you see when you hear the loud noises that frighten you. And he was cured of both the eczema and his phobia.
Wow.
So I thought, well, do parents know about this? Know their children can even have a past life memory, let alone, that they can be healed of these traumas from the past. That was very traumatic for my son in the former life, to be in a battlefield, not knowing what he was fighting for, and, amidst the horrors of war, which I think is very timely right now.
Yes.
So that was the beginning of my journey with children's past lives. It literally fell in my lap with my son.
Wow.
And I took it and ran with it because I thought it was the most amazing thing. And I saw the healing potential of these memories. And it was after that, about a year or two after that, that I discovered the work of Ian Stevenson. So this was in 1988, when Chase had talked about his memory and had his hysterical episode at the fireworks. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners know about Ian Stevenson's work with spontaneous memories in small children. And I read a lot of, I'm getting a little static here. I read a lot of Stevenson's works, and he never mentioned healing as an outcome of children remembering their previous lives. He documented about 2,500 cases, and he did an incredible job of identifying the patterns in his memories, but he never said anything about healing. And again, as fate would have it, after my first book came out, Children's Past Lives, which is really a guidebook for parents. It tells parents how to identify these memories, to tell if they're actually past life memory rather than a fantasy. But actually, I say most parents know in their gut, when a child is talking about that, this is not fantasy, this is something real.
But that's the thing. To treat this as something that is really natural.
Are you getting static, Vanessa? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Are you getting a lot of static on your end?
I can hear something coming from you. Is the phone touching the computer screen?
Okay.
Oh, okay. So let's wait. We wait while we reflect on how natural it is for us to recall previous lives. It's very natural. In Kardec's books, we study about it. Yeah. Is it okay? You can hear some cricket noises.
I'm getting a lot of static, and I can't.
Yeah. It's the phone touching the computer screen?
Yes. Is that the
Yes.
problem?
So maybe if you just...
Okay, it's not now, though.
Okay.
Okay. Moving.
Yeah.
Moving with it. Okay.
Okay.
Let's see if that's any better.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's great. It's better. But if there is a little noise in there, I can still hear you.
I don't know how to stop it. Okay, let me balance something so I don't have to hold it up the whole time. See if this works.
Yeah.
Okay.
It does. It does. Okay. Great. So, Carol, I was just recalling the very beginning when you talked about you remembering of your previous life.
Mm-hmm.
Just how natural it is for us sometimes to have those recollections, though we dismiss or don't know what to do with them, don't want to believe them. There's a classic book that we talk about here, Kardec Radio, named 2,000 Years Ago. when the author, Emmanuel, it's so interesting. He's a Roman senator, and he's recalling his previous life as his own grandfather. And he looks at his grandfather's statue. They are just alike. He looks at the handwriting. It's just the same. He recalls the previous life. He knows why he reincarnated. He talks about this to his friend, and his friend just dismisses it. And throughout the book, we're going to see how that dream was just a guiding warning for him for this life. And at the end of his life, before he dies in Pompeii, he realizes that he just missed the boat because he didn't pay attention to that dream.
Wow.
But you did.
That's a great story. Yeah.
Unlike him, you paid attention, you took measure, you healed, and when it happened to your child, you didn't dismiss it, and it made a difference in his life. So I think, as you say in your book, like, do not dismiss it in a way, right?
Absolutely. And that's the problem in most Western cultures, because well, I don't have to explain to your group, but it's a big, like you said, it's a big impediment to the parents, because of what they've been taught, that this doesn't exist. But I've found that if these traumatic memories, which are the most common memories that children remember of traumatic deaths, and Ian Stevenson had statistics about that. He said about 70% of kids who remembered had traumatic deaths, because a trauma in a past life works very much the same way as a trauma in this life. It can get triggered by similar events, or a sound, a taste, anything can trigger it. And I think, it is a natural process for this energy, these emotions, these thoughts, these feelings, these personality traits to carry over. That's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
But when the trauma carries over and a child remembers a previous life spontaneously, and they have a phobia, or they have sadness or guilt from whatever happened before, this can be healed when they're children through very simple techniques that I describe in the book that I'd be happy to share now. But part of the technique, the most important part, is not to dismiss what a child is saying. Allow them to express what they're remembering. Yes, you just encourage them through their language. If they say something, just reflect back what they're saying, ask open-ended questions, and get them to talk about it, and get them to express whatever emotions they may feel, even if it's uncomfortable for the parent or the adult with them, because a lot of times they will cry in remembering if it's a very sad memory or traumatic memory. And you just need to hold space for them to talk about it, and then assure them that that was something that happened before. You need to validate the memory rather than dismiss it, so they can release it. And it really is, in some cases, it's as simple as that. It's almost ridiculously simple to help a child process it. And what I found from my past life therapy practice for more than 30 years is that when I interview people, as part of the process, I have to get their history. I'll ask a lot of questions about childhood. And people often tell me about their early memories that came through them spontaneously or through the dream state, triggered by something on the outside. And it wasn't addressed at the time because, most parents would just ignore it or shut it down. But if these memories can be addressed at ages 2, 3, 4, or 5, the emotional pattern is greatly diminished or completely disappears. It can be healed in early childhood. And sometimes the more subtle layers come up later too, so when we have the capacity to really process it as adults, because there are certain things that you can say, yes, this is something that happened before yourself. So you're now safe in a new body, and that can do a lot to help healing it. But sometimes these memories are a little more complex and layered, so they need to be addressed again in adulthood. And I found that a child who comes in with phobias, specific phobias related to a previous life, and they aren't addressed, they will persist into adulthood. I work with many adults who, I've had this dream since I was a child. I know it was a past life dream. And I'll say, let's go into it. Let's do it now.
Interesting.
But I think some of these memories can be healed when the child is young. And that's what happened with my kids.
So for example, if a child suddenly develops phobia of any flying bug, that doesn't stop them from actually going to school and doing their things. But whenever they see a bug or a butterfly or a moth, they're like scared. Would that be a reason to bring them to past life regression therapy?
I don't think so. I mean, I think there's so many phobias that are just common, like snakes and heights. And, when I'm taking a person's history, do you have any phobias? Yeah, heights, snakes, spiders. I don't see a past life correlation in that kind of phobia. But if a child has a phobia of loud sounds, it could be related to an explosion or a battlefield memory. I did the Oprah show in 1994, and she was great. She was very open to all of this. And I don't know whether it made it to the show, but she said at some point when I was talking about Chase's phobia, which was triggered by loud booming sounds, she said she was terrified when she was young of a balloon popping.
Oh.
And she wondered out loud, oh, could this be a past life memory? So,
Yeah,
a lot of times it can be.
can be. And
Yeah.
we're talking about the current situation, for example, in the world, in Ukraine and Russia. It's so sad, but it's so beautiful to see the world responding to it in so many ways, right? But we're talking about in the US alone, because of this country's mission, we've been in so many fronts throughout so many decades. So many people have fought, and it's traumatic for those who died in the battlefields of all these wars. So it's so natural that now children are here being born, and they have these types of reactivity that people are like, oh, it's an autistic child because they're sensitive to loud sounds. But maybe there's a pathway that people are not exploring, which is what they are carrying over, the traumatic experiences, as Dr. Stevenson says in his book, the diathenetic elements into the life. But then, as you say, we need to heal it. And I think that's the most important part of your work, to bring
it is. And as souls, we want to heal. For the most part. I mean, I think they're, psychopaths and sociopaths, I don't know whether they're going to break through.
Yeah.
But a lot of us want to heal. And I think these memories come up in children because the soul wants to heal. So it's a great opportunity. And like you said, we haven't even scratched the surface with research into the healing potential of these memories for different conditions in childhood, different constellations of behaviors, or separation anxiety is so common.
Yes.
And quite often it can have a past life source. I think that's one of the most common themes I work with.
Oh, really? Separation anxiety?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just a whole different way of looking at children, their development, their personalities, why they are the way they are. Because as Stevenson said, we are the products of nature, nurture, and reincarnation, which makes it a lot more sense than just nature and nurture.
Exactly. But for the parents who are out there and are asking, uh, why do some children need to go through this recollection? Would you say it's for healing purposes? That's why we reincarnate?
Healing is broad. It's spiritual healing, it's physical healing, it's emotional healing, it's learning who we are. We're more than our bodies. We know that. It's on every level. And I think what's important to me about realizing this is that our actions, our experiences in previous lives do count. It's not erased in the afterlife. We can come back with the same patterns, pick up even with the same relationships, like in same family cases where we are reborn into the same family and resume a relationship, but with different perspectives. So what we do does matter, and it has consequences. And to me, that's sometimes it's just repetition. It's the way this seems to work is what's not resolved can carry over. What's
Mm-hmm.
not processed can carry over.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not punitive. It's just, this is
Learn.
how it works. It's a mechanical type of process in that sense.
It's for learning, it's for progress. And we have somebody here, Carol, Kevin Campbell, saying, good morning. Thank you for this wonderful conversation. I'm a musician and I don't have children, but I have great nephews and nieces. Is interactive music one way of making progress?
Is what making
Interact.
interactive music?
Uh,
Sure. Music is a great healer.
mhm.
I sometimes music can even trigger memories.
Yeah. That's
Different kinds of music can. In fact, I was thinking about this morning, Kevin. When I was 4, I know I was 4. I had kind of an out of body experience listening for the first time that I was aware of listening to Chopin piano music. And I remember where I was sitting in the living room. I remember we had a wool rug. I remember the scratchiness of the rug. And I had this epiphany that I knew the music. It was familiar. It was probably mazurkas or, more common pieces that Chopin did. But I knew I was more than my body. I had a moment out of time where I realized I knew the music. And in some level, it was a very expansive experience, but it was triggered by the music. And I knew there was something in me that survives, that essential part of us that survives everything, the
wow.
core.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so the music triggered it. So music is very powerful. And
It's
just the vibrational quality of music is very powerful and enjoyable.
it is. But for those who are out there and are still asking, what would be the process? Just for those who are wondering, what is the process of these therapeutics for children who recall previous lives and bring to you their children? What happens? It's very different from adult sessions, right?
Oh, totally different. Actually, I don't work directly with the children. I
Mm-hmm.
counsel parents on how to work with their own children because it's very simple.
But you get
There's nothing
children at some point.
mysterious. What?
You get to meet the children at some point.
Not necessarily. I mean, I've worked with children all over the different parts of the world and a lot in the United States. But I see it's kind of interesting because of my limitations in doing this research. When I started, I was using my grocery money to to do things for
Yeah.
funding my research,
Mhm.
um, and so because of the limitation, I started thinking, well, what can parents do to help their own children? And it seemed very natural to me, instead of traveling around the United States, which I couldn't have done because I didn't have the resources to do that. Talking to parents on the phone, finding out what the child is saying, and really listening to them. I would give them suggestions on how to talk to their child. And that's why I wrote the first book. It's not that complicated, but I don't work with the children directly because there's no need to.
At all. You don't get to.
Yeah, and you want to catch this as it's coming up spontaneously. And if you're lucky, if a child talks about their previous life and you have time to get over your initial shock about what's happening,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of parents go into, whoa, what is going on here? Like I did the first time when Chase started talking about his war memory. If you're lucky enough, they'll repeat what they've said, and then you can open up the conversation. Or if they've made some remarks, you can use the remarks to begin the conversation when they're in a relaxed state, like in the bath, after bath, or before bed when they get drowsy, when they're in that hypnagogic state.
Yeah.
So you just talk to them and they're getting it. Their soul is understanding.
I think
rather than, their waking consciousness when they're in that relaxed state. And that's why a lot of kids have spontaneous memories driving in car seats. Because they're already lulled into that state. And, we've all used that device with a cranky child, right? Get them in the car and go for a ride. But that's it. It was so funny because when I was writing the first book, I was commenting to my husband, what is it about the car seat? We get so many of these cases about children talking about their other lives when they're 2 and 3 and sitting in the car seat. And I realized, oh, of course, they're lulled into that hypnagogic state. That's it.
Yeah.
So children go in and out of that state all the time. That's why when they're usually when they're talking about past life memory, they have this kind of abstracted look, like they're looking off into space.
Yeah.
Because they're getting it. It's being downloaded.
Yeah. But what I like about your approach is that somewhat nowadays we see so many parents who just want to, give their load of issues to somebody else to fix, but instead you empower the parents. Because I think it's hard for any child to overcome anything if the parents are not on board.
Yeah.
Right? So
Absolutely.
I think one of the most interesting parts that I find in your work is precisely that you empower the parents to help that child, because I think that's the order of events in nature. This child is recalling something, but the parents, they are not together with this child by chance, right? We all remain together for a purpose, and the healing is families, like the whole family is healing through the process. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, it's especially in the same family cases.
Mm-hmm.
When you realize that this little toddler is really your father who died before the child was born, or whoops, I've got to move again. I have a low battery. Let's hope this works.
No problem.
Okay.
So as you move there, I just want to remind everybody that as here at Kardec Radio, we are always talking about reincarnation. It's all for learning, for growing, for healing. And with Carol's studies and work, we've come to know and have the evidence that it is so. So, right, Carol, you were talking about like the healing is not only for the child, but for the family at large, right?
Yeah. If I can say, direct your listeners, I wrote a 25,000 word essay this past summer for a contest, the Bigelow contest, which I didn't win.
Well, you won for us.
Well, thank you. I spent 5 months on it. But if you go to my website, you can find a link for the article. And I think I really talk a lot about healing and about empowering parents in the article. And that is my approach. In the Stevenson camp, a lot of the researchers who are doing this will not address that.
Mhm.
So I think it's really, it really, it demands more of us to educate parents that this is real, this has healing potential. And I think the article will help give you a good idea of what I'm talking about too. It's,
Yeah.
I
I
want people to read it because I wrote it, it didn't win money, it didn't win an award, but it's my legacy.
Yes, I
This
have
whole,
the essay here in front of me, and I've just
oh,
shared here in all of our channels that are connected to us now. So everybody who is listening to us, watching us, you can go to the very link. And I have here the abstract in front of me, and it's so interesting. I would just read the beginning, just the beginning to tease everyone. Young children all over the world have spontaneous memories of previous lives, regardless of the religious beliefs of the parents. It's a natural phenomenon. Just this beginning, Carol, it's written in a way that reminds me of Kardec studies, you know, in all of his books,
mhm,
like making
mhm,
it natural because it is natural. It's not a psychopathology, right?
exactly.
Many
Yep.
people would say so, but it's not. It's a natural phenomenon, and there is a reason why it's being brought up to this current life because this life is about healing too. So I love your essay on healing, and people can read here. And at the very end, you talk about the implications of all this, and I think it's very rich and it's worthwhile.
Thank you. Thank you. And the reason why I brought it up is talking about healing. There's one case that I summarize. All the cases have been greatly summarized, greatly reduced in words
Yeah.
because I had a word limit on the essay, but I took them from the full cases in my books, or, there are a few unpublished cases there, formerly unpublished. And there's oh, one of a little boy who died in a house fire with his father. I think there were 5 kids, and the father went back into the burning house to rescue his youngest, and they were both found under a mattress. They had, because of inhalation of smoke, they died in the house as he was trying to rescue the youngest child. So I think it was 20 years later, one of the surviving siblings, a daughter, gave birth to this child who was terrified of fire,
Oh, wow.
who started talking about the fire in great detail from both a vantage point of being under a mattress, which um, the mother didn't even know about. That detail was never revealed to her because she was 2 at the time of the fire. And anyway, so this child, after all of these revelations from him when he was about 3 and 4, she wondered, could this be my brother reborn, the brother who died in the fire? And she started talking to her mother, who would never talk about that night because she lost both her husband and her son in the fire. And it was just too traumatic. She never really recovered. So the family couldn't talk about it. But she started talking to her mother saying, is this what happened that night? And she would say something that her son had said, her 3 or 4 year old. And finally, the grandmother came around to believing that this child was her son reborn. And they were always close, but this realization that what she felt for this child, of all her grandchildren, she was closest to this child. She was also able to talk about the trauma that one of the traumas of that bigger trauma was that the night before, the night of the fire, she had spanked this little boy for something he did. Instead of saying, I love you before he went to bed, she had disciplined him. And she had a really hard time living with that guilt, that was the last thing she did. So when this opened up for her, she was able to talk freely, and she was so happy and relieved. She said, a lot of the power of the trauma diminished after this. And she had a wonderful relationship with this child who ended up going more to the grandmother to talk about things than the mother. And she
Oh,
said, the mother said, you know, if I hadn't known why they were so close, I would be jealous of the relationship. Now I'm just grateful that my mother can heal and they can have this relationship again.
wow.
It's so profound. And the thing that really gets me is if people were aware of this, it would change everything. It would change how we feel about death, about relationship, you know, and it can work the other way too, not in a positive way. You know, we have, you know, there's certain relationships where are not good or, you know,
Yeah.
have suffered because of various reasons. But we get another chance. Even if we wronged someone or someone wronged us, if they come back into the family, if once we realize who they are and why they're acting this way towards us, because a lot of the same patterns can persist.
Mhm.
You know, you understand what's going on. Without it, you know, you're going to rush off to the psychiatrist with a oppositional behavior child.
This is so important because I see much of this happening nowadays, and you talk about past life patterns in your essay as well. As soon as you end the description of the case you mentioned, you enter this piece of past life patterns, and now you're talking about the implications, and I want to refocus on relationships because probably this is the reason why we are here to master relationships and to understand that this is not new, probably it's not a first time. And would you say, even when we don't recall, we have signs like instinctive tendencies? Would you say?
Yes, absolutely. You know, and yes, it's understanding that the quality of relationship can persist. And there are a couple of, I can't remember if I put them in the essay or not, but see, I can't remember already. It was last summer. There were some parents who contacted me who had very difficult relationships with their mothers. The mothers were abusive alcoholics or narcissists, whatever it was. And when the soul came back, the mothers died, and they came back as their daughter's children. And they recognized through what the child was saying and their behaviors, the things that they liked, the things they disliked, all the personality traits, I should say, that it was their mother. They realized why the child was reacting to them in a certain way. And, you know, a lot of times it is oppositional.
Yeah.
So once they realize that, they can be better parents, knowing what it is and helping the child understand that they can be different and change the behavioral patterns. You don't have to repeat the generational pattern. You
Mhm.
get that insight. So it's, as Elizabeth Kubler-Ross used to say, she used to say a lot of good things, but
Yeah.
you know, one of them is, you don't, like the mother who spanked her child before he went to bed. You know, you have to approach life with "I love you," as if it would be the last time you would see that person. You know, try to heal relationships as much as you can. And some of them can't be healed
Yes.
in this life. You know, that's just the way it is. But through forgiveness and understanding, you can heal a lot of issues.
You're right. So you're talking about, like nowadays, you talked about the oppositional behavior. It's becoming so common to see in so many kids nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why do you think this is happening? You think it's just a
I
matter of,
don't know. I mean, I think there's so many factors. You know, toxicity in the environment
mm-hmm,
affects us.
mm-hmm,
Food additives.
yeah,
You know, there are a lot of different things that affect us. Screen time.
screen
We
time.
talked about that before. You know, that something that drives me crazy when I see you know, a toddler on a phone
Yeah,
or in front of a video you know, while the mother has the stroller out in the park and they're out in nature and there's a screen.
Yeah.
Or the mother has a screen.
Oh, yeah. That's very common.
Yeah. I think there are just a lot of factors. And I think this is an extraordinary time for, consciousness to start shifting and, hopefully, and maybe this is making the memories more frequent. Maybe we're just more aware of it. When you label something, you become more aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there always have been these behaviors, and ADHD and dyslexia, and, it wasn't diagnosed when I was growing up.
And autism,
Yeah.
right?
Well, that is, I don't know. I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah. In Spiritism, two things I want to share with you to see your take on it. Two major Spiritist mediums from Brazil, Chico Xavier and Divaldo Franco. And in the last issue of the Spiritist magazine, we actually have an article about this, about Chico Xavier saying the information he received, that some cases of autism is just that they don't want to reincarnate.
I think that could be.
But they refuse. So they are still in this refusal. So he recommends talking to the child, the spirit of the child, the soul, saying, "You're welcome. This is a good opportunity." So, like, bring that soul into this. Would you say it's valid?
Oh, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely, it's very highly probable that that could be some of the cases. I did hear of a case many years ago of an autistic child who went to an energy healer somewhere in the Midwest. And I couldn't document the case because, it was kind of a secondhand account. But the moment this child, how did it go? The psychic healer picked up on the fact that the child's father had killed him in a previous life. And I don't know whether it was accidental or with malice, but as soon as the child was born and saw the father, he went into a state of shock. And this healer talked him through from what she was getting about the father and that he's a different person this time. And he snapped out of it, that autistic state. He was in his body here. So, I think it could be a lot of different things. It could be past life trauma, so traumatic that they're in shock. I don't know. But I like the explanation that you just gave.
Yeah.
I think that's highly possible.
So nowadays, as we are coming out of this pandemic, hopefully, but we're still in this battlefield, the international conflict that we hope is just going to be dissolved. But there's so many emotions. We talk to therapists, pediatricians, and they are seeing not only the adults, but it's affecting children so much. Their behavior, their attitude, everything is so, people are more sensitive, sometimes more aggressive, more reactive.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably a good time to talk about healing for those very reasons why we are going through this. And it's not first time, Carol. Humankind's history is full of times in which we had epidemics. So how many have died in previous times? And I wonder sometimes if at this very moment we are recapitulating some of those experiences. And I'll just bring an interesting note here. There is a book that we study here named Renunciation. It talks about the first movements of European immigration into the US. And it's like Ireland, Spain, and France involved, and then the United States. And in this book named Renunciation, it talks about one of these times of epidemic in Europe and how one woman because she wanted the husband of her cousin. She used the very epidemic to get rid of the woman. And then the whole story goes on. So I wonder, reincarnation wise, how many of us experienced those times and now we are recapitulating. And then if that's not one of the reasons why sometimes it's so intense for some people. So
I think so. Yeah, it's the trigger. And it's interesting because my son has been living in Prague with his partner, and actually her parents fled when the Russians came. They went to Vienna. Maggie was born in Vienna, and then after the revolution, they went back to the Czech Republic. But she said that everyone there is traumatized because of the Nazis coming in during the Second World War, at the beginning of the Second World War, and then the Russians. So here we are with another Russian invasion, and that's even triggering people now. So the past life stuff works in exactly the same way. You know, we have certain triggers for certain events because we're all feeling it. You know, anyone who's died in a war, which is probably all of us at one time or another.
Yes.
We're all getting triggered again, and this is getting very real again. And it's, you know, the United States has started some wars that were terribly unjust, and we all know that. That's part of our American shadow, and, you know, slavery and genocide of Native Americans. You know, there's big shadow here we haven't addressed. I forgot where I was going with this, but, you know, the triggers are there for all of us.
Yeah.
The question is, when are we going to wake up?
Yes. When are we going to face it, right?
Yeah. When Chase, my son, who had the memory of being a soldier, was 7, his memory started at 5 when he had that first experience with the hypnotherapist, and, you know, just sitting casually around the kitchen table. It wasn't in an office or anything. It would just kind of happen spontaneously. By the age of 7, he was still remembering it, and his memory got triggered again with that first Iraq war. When we went into Iraq, and we were afraid, you know, we were going to start a war here, and he got triggered again. And during that, when he was 7, he went back to exactly the same scene in battle, and he remembered his death. And after he went through the death experience in this vision, you know, in this regress state, he was above looking down at the smoky battlefield, and he said, and this is a 7-year-old who, you know, we didn't speak this language, but he came up with these words himself. He said, looking down at the battlefield, he said, "I'm glad I'm out. It's a relief. I get to go to a more peaceful life." And he said, everyone has to experience a war. We all do that because we have to learn how other people feel. It teaches us that war is bad. It hurts everyone. This is a 7-year-old.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, so he was he was integrating that memory into his 7-year-old consciousness. And it's interesting because after writing the book and doing a lot of lectures, I said, you know, Chase's eczema went away, the eczema on his wrist, which had corresponded to the site of this injury he had on the battlefield. It wasn't the fatal injury, but it was right before he died. When he was a freshman in college, he came home one weekend, and so from 5 to 18, he didn't suffer from the eczema at all. It just disappeared right after that first session. But he came back and he said, the eczema's back.
Oh.
You know, I was like, oh no.
Wow. What does that mean?
Yeah, you know, after I wrote it in the book, and, you know, told everybody that it went away. I said, well, what's been going on? And he thought for a moment. He said, oh, I had to register my name for the draft to get student loans. He had just done that. So even the thought of serving in the military brought up the somatic, the body memory for him. So, you know, there are triggers all the time. We get triggered the things that trigger us are usually pretty deep. You know, it can go back to childhood, but can it go even further back than that? It's deeper than that.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like we come in with this energetic template that has these certain charges in it.
Yes. We call it the spiritual body, like the perispirit, and it's all there. The memories are there, and
Exactly.
boom, the trigger brings it down, like almost downloading, as you said. But then the good news is we have therapy for this, right?
Yeah, and I think even with the kids coming in, like you said, with all the different, like the oppositional behavior or autism, um, we have resources now. We have things available to us that were never, well, maybe not in modern times available or in the West. Yeah.
Yes.
They have techniques in tribal cultures, you know, native cultures. They do have healing techniques, which, you know, it's energetic.
Yes.
It's
And
prayer, it's energy, it's, yeah,
I
ritual.
I want to bring just highlight one of the things that you mentioned that Rihanna from South Africa is saying. Wow, I think that explains why we feel the way we feel about what's going on in Ukraine. What you said before,
Oh,
so
yeah.
important. I can see an article going to newspapers explaining to people why
But
we're
we can feel this so deeply now. You know, that's, but that's a good thing. That's connecting us.
yes,
You know, it's not us and them. It's all, you know, it's us.
it's us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I think there has to be more awareness of that we're all one.
yes, yes. And in Brazil, Fabiola Mello is saying there is this book about the researcher Hermínio Miranda, who got to know of Ian Stevenson. They were colleagues.
Hmm.
He wrote this book, Our Children, Our Spirits, and it goes
Hmm.
back to what you were saying about the healing process. So today, Carol, just for today, because we pray that you come back more often to bring us the good news, the therapy that we need. But for those who are watching us, whether adults, uh, themselves experiencing it, or their children, grandchildren, their students, if they are educators, teachers. So there is a solution, and that's what we need to know. We don't need to be desperate. There is a solution. There are therapists like yourself who can help. And for those who are there, carolbowman.com is the website for everyone. It's right here in the links at the very beginning of the program. You have the links in all the platforms. So, uh, okay, I guess there's somebody asking about astral protection. I'm not so sure about that. I don't understand what that is. I'm sorry if the person wants to explain a little more. But Carol, as we march to the closing moments of our conversation here with you, where we're learning so much, what would you like to share with those who are here today, is still experiencing the aftermath of this pandemic that is hopefully wrapping up, or affected so much by what's happening in this international conflict? What would you like to share?
Um, Go with your feelings. You know, I think it just occurred to me that if we can feel that what the Ukrainians are experiencing so deeply, and I know a lot of Russians are too, that's our only hope. You know, empathy and love. It just, this is a much more mundane level, but my daughter, uh, who lives in Brooklyn, she's 40, she's going to be 43 this month,
Wow.
sent me an email that right before the show, she, and this is something that's happening around the world, people are booking Airbnbs in different cities in Ukraine, buying a few days, not going, of course, but to
Right.
support the people there directly. The money goes directly to people
Uh-huh.
And she got the most amazing email back from a Ukrainian woman who said, "I'll never forget, you know, what you did when in my time of need." And I think this is something we can do globally. We can't go over there and help them.
Yeah.
But they need economic help too, because it's going to be such a big task to rebuild
Yeah.
and to get food. They're going to need money. That makes the world go round on a certain level.
You're right. Wow, what a
So,
beautiful idea.
yeah, so we can all do that. I'm going to do that today.
Yes.
Yeah, she inspired me, and then I saw right before I came on air, my husband sent me an email. I think it was the New York Times or the Guardian was talking about how this is building to a worldwide phenomenon, in a matter of hours, how things can go viral now.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, it's touching them, touching their lives, on some very primal level too, that we're concerned, we want to help, and this is a way we can help. So I
Yes.
think, we shouldn't deny the feelings or think there's anything wrong with us feeling it so much. I think this is what the world needs too. I just hate the thought that we're all sitting by and we can't do anything.
You're right. And even John DeRosa, he's saying, Carol just explained why my wife, who is a nurse and she's adorable, Nina, has been experiencing an enormous amount of tension over the last several days due to the Ukrainian situation and past life. And it's amazing. So many people are experiencing it. It's shocking. I'm seeing people really
Yeah.
reacting in a different level to this scenario. And
It's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I saw that I stopped sleeping a few days before the attacks began.
yeah.
And I thought, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me?
Mhm.
But I think, now I'm looking at it, I wonder if I was tapping into the angst.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And a
But I
good
think that,
way,
yeah,
go ahead,
go
please.
ahead.
No, I think it's great that you said it's not only the prayers, not only the good thoughts, the empathy, but the action, because we're in the material world. And it's
Exactly.
so interesting. I've never thought about it. And it's so interesting, like trying to find ways to help people materially there directly, like the Airbnb's rent and so many other things. So, okay. So you called us for an action and we're going to take this action, Carol, thanks to you.
That's exciting. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it makes me feel good that we can do something
Yes.
directly,
Yeah.
and just somebody just this woman was so touched by someone she didn't know at all who wanted to help. And I'm getting emotional because it is so emotional right now.
It is. It is. And as you
Yeah,
said, we are all involved and it's part of us. It's as if we are recapitulating our very history, too. So let's take action. So we'll finalize, Carol, not only by thanking you for being here with us, but by reminding everybody this call to action, finding ways to help people directly there, go to Airbnb and other things. And if you have more suggestion, friends, write in the comments of this very program here so other people can benefit from this, the ideas on this action to help Ukrainians, wherever they are now, the ones who are displaced, the ones who are still there, and of course, always praying for the Russians because at the end of the day, we are brothers and sisters, even if they don't feel like it. Right, Carol?
exactly. Yeah. Oh, well, this was a real treat, Vanessa. I
Oh,
always have a great time with you.
I love being with you, and I'm sure everybody here. Nora is also, she's a teacher in Texas. She's talking about how important it is to know of this work that you do to help her understand her own students. And our friends here sending love and light. Thank
Oh,
you so much. And thank you, Carol, again and again for being with us, for teaching us, and for the opportunity of knowing more of these works. But we know this is not it. There is more to come. So we
yeah,
will.
And again, thank you for always giving me the opportunity to speak. Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you. You are welcome. Thank you, Carol. So we want to thank everyone who joined us today for your comments, for your participation. Share this link, share this interview, allow people to know of it. This explanation is unprecedented. We didn't plan on it, we didn't expect it, but here it is. Healing coming through this very screen. Thank you, Carol, for your presence, for your books, for your work. And we hope to see you soon again, friends, and Carol too, here at Kardec Radio. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Kardec Radio, where we are always nourishing our souls.